Welcome back to Mr. Lover's Math. Today we're going to solve a quadratic equation without factoring. So we're going to do that by taking the square root. So first we got a warm up. I'm asking you to solve for x. So we're going to do some one to multi-step equation solving here. So 3x plus 2 equals 12. I got to get the x term by itself. So I move this 2. I subtract it from both sides. And then to undo that multiplication, I divide by 3. It is okay that we got 3.3. Letter B, subtract 5 from both sides. 1 minus 5 is negative 4. And then letter C, I'm moving the constant to the other side. Right now it says a minus 31, so I'm going to add 31 to both sides. 2 plus 31 is 33. Divide by negative 4. And once again, I get a decimal, and that is okay. So that is solving is getting us ready for what we're going to do today, which is solving by taking the square root. So here's some steps for success. We're going to get the x squared, or the quadratic term, by itself. So in this example, my goal is to get this x squared all by itself. In order to do that, I am giving you steps for success. You are following them in this order if you need to. So the first thing is you will use addition or subtraction to move the constant. And remember, the constant is just a number. So in the example here, I have a constant. I need to move that constant, and I'm already telling you the operational choices. It's either addition or subtraction. It depends on the problem. This is a positive 14. So if it's positive and I want it to get rid of it, I'm going to subtract it. So I subtract 14 from both sides. That's how I got the 2x squared equals 8. Once that's done, or if I don't have to move a constant, I go to the next step, which is use division to separate the coefficient and x squared. So I'm already telling you what operation is going to happen. You're going to divide that coefficient if it's there. So I divide both sides by 2 because my coefficient of the quadratic term is 2. Divide by 2, I get x squared on the left and I get 4 on the right. Now that the x squared term is by itself, I'm at step 2 where it says take the square root of both sides. Now I drew the symbol for the square root so you knew what we were doing. I'm square rooting both sides. When I square root a square, those are inverses. They cancel out. Just like to get rid of this positive, I'm going to subtract, or to get rid of this multiplication, I'm going to divide. Those are inverses. Same thing here. When you square root a square, they reduce to what was under the square root, in this case, just x. But notice that I said make sure that you have a positive and negative solution for step 3. So the square root of 4 is 2, and you're thinking, well, Mr. Slover, when I hit the square root of 4 on my calculator, it only told me 2. How do I know it's negative 2? Well, let's think about this. 2 times 2 is 4. But negative 2 times negative 2 is also 4. So I have 2 different ways that I can multiply to give me 4. One is positive and one is negative. That's why I have 2 different solutions. One is positive and one is negative. So your calculator is only going to spit out the positive 2. It's your responsibility to make sure you write the negative value as well. All right, so that was our first one that we worked through. So now we're going to start trying these on our own. It says solve the following quadratic equations by taking the square root down to the nearest tenth if needed. So x squared equals 36. Well, my quadratic term is already by itself, so I don't have to do A or B. I can jump straight down to number 2 where it says square root both sides. So I'm square rooting both sides. I hit square root of 36 on my calculator. It tells me 6. And I remember I got to have the negative solution as well, so negative 6. Letter B, my x squared, or my quadratic term, is all by itself. So all I have to do is take the square root of both sides, and I get 10 and negative 10. Letter C, same concept. Square root both sides, I get 3 and negative 3. Make sure you have both answers for each one. Example 2. Solve the following quadratic equations by taking the square root and round to the nearest tenth. So now my square root's kind of by itself, or sorry, my quadratic term's kind of by itself, but it's not. It has a coefficient, right? A coefficient that's not 1. So I want to get rid of that coefficient, and I already told you previously in the steps for success that in order to get rid of it, you are dividing. 100% of the time, you're going to divide by that coefficient. So I divide by 3 first and get 49. Then I take the square root. Remember, when you square root a square, the square root and the square cancel. They reduce. Square root 49 is 7. Don't forget the negative 7 as well. Divide by 2 for letter B. Your calculator may spit out 5 root 2, or it may spit out 7.1. I don't care which one you have. So if your calculator spits out 5 root 2, there's your answer, along with negative 5 root 2. If you have a calculator that spits out a decimal, then just write 7.1 and negative 7.1. Doesn't matter. Letter C, very similar. All right, example 3. Same directions, but now I'm going to be using all of the steps for success. So I have to isolate. I've got to get the x squared, the quadratic term, by itself. First, I have to move the constant. In this case, it's a negative 17. So I'm going to add 17 to both sides. Negative 17 plus 17 reduces to the 0. I'm left with the 3x squared. 10 plus 17 is 27. So now I'm back to what I just did on the last problem. Or to undo that multiplication, I divide. So I divide both sides by 3, and I get x squared equals 9. And then finally, I take the square root of both sides, remembering that I have one positive and one negative solution. Letter B, same concept. Here's my coefficient. Sorry, here's my constant. I need to move the constant. It is positive, so I subtract to get rid of it. 16 minus 16, that cancels out. I'm left with the 2x squared, which is what I wanted. On the other side, I have a 14. Divide by 2, x squared equals 7. Take the square root. When you take the square root of 7, it just stays root 7. It's already simplified. So when you write your answer, make sure that you put the square root in there. Right? If you were to take root 7 and turn it into a decimal, you get 2.6. If you did not have the square root, then you're telling me x is 7 instead of x is 2.6. That's not right. All right, $7 is not the same as $2.60. Remember that you also have the negative value. Letter C and D are very similar to A and B, just different numbers. So today we focused on solving these equations, these quadratic equations, by taking the square root. So 3x squared minus 17 equals 10. X is 3 and x is negative 3. If I were to take either of those and substitute it back in, it would make my each rate equation true. So if you have